How do you know what sort of assessment you should do? This is actually a more complicated question than it would at first seem. In order to successfully do a risk assessment, we need a very clear picture of the scope, context, and criteria for the work. But what do I mean by this? Before we can start an assessment, we need to clearly understand the questions we are trying to answer. We also need a good understanding of the ultimate decision maker and who will be responsible for taking action on the findings. Who's the audience, and what guidance are they seeking from the work? Ideally, this should be completed prior to engaging a consultant or charging staff with getting on with the assessment. These people need to understand the work they're being asked to do. However, decision makers and assessment teams often will settle the scope, context, and criteria during the initial stages of work. This happens because, as the team gathers, different insights can emerge that influence the decision makers' perspectives about what they want to learn from the project. So, what are we actually trying to define at this stage? We're trying to gain a good understanding of the breadth and depth of the assessment. This emerges from how the decision maker defines the scope, context, and criteria. Scope. The scope of the assessment derives from the decision maker's objectives. What are the questions we're trying to answer? What systems are included? And what are specifically excluded? To whom will the work be reported? And what are their expectations? Is the work to be very detailed? Or is its purpose more of a screening of potential climate risks? Is risk treatment included in the work? Or will separate teams be assigned to develop treatments after the assessment is finalized? What timeframes are of interest, short or long term? Do we include development plans, changes in the surrounding community, and refurbishment schedules? And finally, any other question the decision maker decides they need to answer. Context. What is the reach and perspective of the assessment? This helps establish the boundary conditions for the work. The assessment should only consider impacts within the boundaries established by the decision maker. While there may be real risks outside of these boundaries, the decision maker should establish the limits of the current work. Issues outside of these limits may be noted, but fully resolving these issues may be deemed to be outside of the boundaries of the current project. Context also defines the perspectives of the assessment. Is it more concerned with internal matters that are under the direct control of the decision maker and their staff? Or does it include broader issues? These could include impacts on the neighbors, customers, visitors, or broad socioeconomic issues like supply chain, public health and safety, macroeconomic impacts on communities, provinces, and even nationally, broader local, regional, and national policies, changes in the surrounding community, such as population, the way systems interact with users, and all that over time. Generally, context is a mix of internal and external concerns. The final outcome of context analysis is clarity about the ultimate boundary conditions of the work. Criteria. The criteria for the assessment draw upon the decision maker's risk appetite. That's the amount of risk they are comfortable to accept in pursuit of their goals. And every organization has its own risk appetite, depending on the size of the organization, personalities of its decision makers, their experience of previous events, revenue, budgets, and a host of other factors. The criteria for the assessment define how the decision maker rates the impact of different events. Criteria analysis considers two major elements. In the first, we consider the areas of performance that the decision maker decides are relevant to their work. These could include service levels, safety, both internal and external to the organization, functionality, maintenance, social impacts, local, regional, national, environmental impacts, and any other factor that the decision maker deems relevant. Next, we consider the relative importance of these areas of performance and translate these into scoring metrics. In many assessments, this yields a 5-point scale where a score of 1 means minimal impact and 5 means a major impact that's unacceptable to the decision maker. Measurement criteria are typically rolled up into a single scale that can be used throughout the assessment. In this way, scoring criteria used throughout the assessment should consider performance indicators and scoring metrics that represent the owner's objectives and reflect their risk appetite. So how does this all fit together? First, we can see a significant overlap in the considerations covered in each of scope, context, and criteria. Second, we can see how refining one category can, and often does, impact the definitions of other categories. This is an iterative process where decisions made in each category lead to refinement in others. This can feed back to the original decision, leading to further refinement throughout the chain. Also, we can see that the analysis imposes limits on the number of factors that may be included in any given category. While the overall breadth and depth of an assessment potentially could be very large, this analysis identifies the factors within each category the decision maker deems pertinent to the current work. Different assessments, even those conducted by the same organization, may define different boundary conditions. The breadth of the assessment can significantly drive the cost, the amount of internal and external consultation needed, the schedule, and overall technical complexity of the work. And all of this may influence the decision maker's final decisions about the work. These considerations ultimately define the sort of assessment you may wish to do. And as I said earlier, this is not a simple question. But our experience is that organizations who do good analysis of scope, context, and criteria are more efficient in their assessments, have better budget management, meet project schedules, and they get results that answer the needs of their organization.